What a marvel this episode is going to be because it's oozing with some Sega Genesis goodness. Let's check it out. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Check It Out. This is episode 12. I'm your host Xander Skullion, where I talk about some games that I recommend and even sometimes get recommendations from viewers like you with our 1 minute crunch. Now this episode's a little different because I'm actually going to be focusing on one console only, and that is one of my favorite consoles of all time, and that is the Sega Genesis. The Genesis has a lot of great gems, and these are some of my personal favorites, so let's check it out.
Pulseman. Before Game Freak was making an empire with Pokemon with Nintendo, they created this truly hidden gem on the Genesis. In the future of 1999, the world is consumed by a network of ultra computers, and you can play as a half-human, half-computer, being known as Pulseman. The origins of his creation is pretty self-explanatory, but most importantly, the gameplay is very similar in ways to Mega Man, but with a twist. Pulseman can dematerialize in stages, giving him a more unique style of platforming. The sprites of this game are really some of the best I've seen on the Genesis, and sadly it was only released in America on the Sega channel, which is no longer in service, and also the Wii Virtual Console, which sadly now is no longer in service. But fear not, they do make reproduction cards, and the power of emulation, you should definitely check this game out. The Ooze. Developed by Sega Technical Institute, The Ooze is another interesting top-down style game. Players control Dr. Kane as a puddle of ooze with a head who can move around and use two different attacks. One is stretching out a maneuver sliver of ooze, whose length is only limited by as much ooze as you have to currently attack. Players can also spit globs of ooze, which actually will reduce the size of the puddle. Enemies will attack you and deplete the size of your puddle, and the ooze will die either by becoming way too small or getting the head attacked directly, or he can also die by dropping off edges of certain areas or staying on a drain for too long. Numerous puzzles can be completed in order to progress from one level to another, and another optional goal of the game is to collecting all 50 of these little pieces to see the game's good ending. It's crazy to think that this was supposed to be a bundle with the Sega Nomad, and was made by the same folks who brought us Sonic Spinball, which is another one of my personal favorites. This game really screams the 90s attitude and is actually widely available, being an unlockable in many Genesis compilations, including the Sonic Ultimate Collection on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3.
And now it's that time for a 1 minute crunch.
What is up, guys? John the Retrobro here, and I am talking about Burning Force for my 1 minute crunch, a game I've actually never heard of until recently. Thankfully to the wonderful technology of emulation. But let's talk about it, guys. Burning Force is a game by Namco. It was actually released in 1990. Prior to its release in the Western markets, it was actually a Japan-only release in 1989. The gameplay is very similar to Space Harrier, but in my opinion controls much better and allows the player to brake and slow down with more weapon options as well. The game has a very basic storyline. You're a space cadet who is in her final stages of training and must complete 6 stages battling high-tech space enemies. The first thing that drew me into this game was its soundtrack and presentation. When we think Genesis, we think clangy synthwave chiptunes that take us back to post-TGIF Sonic sessions before starting the weekend. Not only is the soundtrack totally 80s, bro, but the gameplay is top tier. For the Genesis anyways, it's smoother than Space Harrier and prettier as well with its 3D environments. And with only a $22 price tag, it's a pretty affordable game. And of course you can always head over to retrobrogaming.com and it will be on our plug-and-play Raspberry Pi consoles available for purchase. Xander, take it back to you, brother.
Marvel Land, released in 1989 from Namco, is truly a treasure I feel like a lot of people have not had a chance to play because it was never released in the West. It stayed in Japan. Now, it's a action platform and it mixes elements of Super Mario Bros. And even some Alex Kidd in there. Because like Super Mario Brothers, you have power-ups, like you have dragon wings that help you jump higher, you have shoes that make you run faster, you're trying to save the princess from an evil mole king, but what makes this game unique and what gives it that Alex Kidd kind of flavor is at the end of each world, the last boss, it's almost like a mini game. You have rock, paper, scissors, and tug of war. There's tons of little Easter eggs in this game as well. There's some cameos by Pac-Man and Dig Dug. I really think it's unfortunate that we never got to play this game because I think it would have been very popular during its initial release of 1989. But with the power of emulation, you can play it, and since it is just a platformer on the Sega Genesis, you can easily import the Japanese copy and play it with no problems because there's not a whole lot of text with this game. In Landstalker, you play as Nigel, the treasure hunter who is tasked with searching for clues that lead to the treasure of King Knoll. Now, most notably about the game is the style. It's an isometric view, and the puzzles of this game are very unique and is filled to the T with fantasy adventure. I feel like the playstyle is a breath of fresh air, as well as kind of challenging. In so many ways, it gives me a Zelda vibe mixed with another NES game I cannot recommend enough called Solstice. Expect a good chunk of exploring, leveling weapons, and epic boss battles. Landstalker is legit a game to check out. Elemental Master. This title by Technosoft takes a top-down shooter in a different way. Before I played this, top-down shooters were very commando style and featured jungle scenery and lots of broing bandana action. While Elemental Master is more of a fantasy style in the art direction, the story is pretty ambitious for this kind of genre, featuring kingdom betrayals and evil brothers and just all sorts of craziness. With a badass soundtrack from the composer of Thunder Force series and Dragon's Fury, this game showcases the arcade brought home that the Genesis thrived on. I cannot say check this title out enough.
Now, first off, I want to give a big shout and a huge thank you to Retrobro for submitting a 1 Minute Crunch to the channel again. He's been a big contributor to the series, and thank you so much. I have to admit, I've never played Burning Force until I watched your 1 Minute Crunch. I checked it out myself, and it was a lot of fun. This is what I love about the series. I love finding about new games for myself, and I like telling you guys about games. And if you have a game you want to recommend and you want to submit a 1 Minute Crunch, be sure to email us at excessgamingpodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's excessgamingpodcast@gmail.com. Just keep in mind, the 1 Minute Crunch, you have to talk about the game in at least 1 minute. That's where it gets kind of interesting. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching another episode of Check It Out. And if you want to see more episodes in this format where I kind of dive into just one console itself, be sure to let me know. What's a console you'd like to see for a future episode? Anyway, guys, as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And as always, happy gaming.